can hear it.
You want to be comfortable, but like not move your head too much.
Got it.
Sam moves his head all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so let me just we'll go over like what we're gonna do, and then we can just jump into it. So
Okay.
we'll just talk for a little bit. We kind of don't. We'll record an intro later. We just kind of keep it conversational.
Okay.
And then we'll talk, and then we do our advice questions. Like, I'll just read it, and then we're just gonna discuss it. And honestly, it's like you don't need to be an expert in anything. It's just we just talk
Right.
about our own experiences with the same problem, basically.
Yeah, we usually don't even give any advice to the last second. Mostly we're just like, oh, I had an experience similar to that. Let me tell you about my experience, whatever. So we try to steer away from like, here's what you should do, ABC.
Right, right,
It's hard to resist. Sometimes we get into it. It's easy to tell someone what to do.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
But like, I've been doing a lot of speeches and stuff like that. And I'm going out there and I'm talking more. So I'm trying to like stay away from putting myself into that. And being more about the audience.
Yeah.
So I get it.
And then when we wrap up, we'll just ask you for like a piece of advice that someone's given you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so I found out about you because my wife is a big knitter, and I think she came across your Instagram. I don't think she knew about like the TED Talk and things like that.
Right.
So, and she was like, you should check
That's
out
so
this
cool.
guy. Yeah,
That's cool.
But I bet you've been having like a lot of experiences like that lately.
Yeah. I'm starting to get recognized, like on the subway, walking down the street. It's weird. It's, you know what I mean? It's not like I'm not used to that attention. So it's like, oh yeah, and I'm like.
So can you
how
walk
did you blow
people
up?
through? Yeah,
Tell us
like
the
tell the story.
story.
So about 2 years ago, so I'll rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
So I started knitting about 10 years ago, and it was over a dream that I had one morning. I woke up, I had this dream that I was knitting, and I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, are you serious?
Okay.
Like, so I never had a desire to want to knit, learn. I was never crafty like that. And I was like, maybe this is a sign. And so I couldn't get that dream out of my head the entire day.
Do you usually take your dreams pretty
I don't.
seriously?
I don't. So, once in a while, you like, oh, that's weird. I just dreamt about this. But then I talked about it earlier in that day. So I was like, that's the connection, right? But this just came out of nowhere. And it was like just a dream I had. And
what were you knitting in the dream?
All I saw, honestly, was just my hands working with the yarn and the knitting needles. That was it. And in my dream, it felt like I knew what I was doing. And I woke up feeling like that, having that feeling. And that's why I was like, I think I should pursue this. I should try to learn how to knit. And that very same day, I mean, I couldn't get it out of my head the entire day at work. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. So I went to Michael's Arts and Crafts store, bought some yarn knitting needles, came home, hopped onto YouTube, and that's how I started. And I picked it up really fast. That's the crazy thing. So I've been knitting. So 10 years I've been knitting. And then 2 years ago, so I'm on the train, I'm knitting, and which was another obstacle I had to overcome.
Knitting on the train.
Yeah, knitting on the train.
Tell me about that.
So
This isn't just any train. We're talking about the New York City subways.
Exactly. So like people are constantly staring at you. You know, you're in close proximity to people, so you just can't escape.
Like people know your business. If you're reading a book, they know what book
or
you're
if
reading.
you're on your phone, you always see people looking to the right. I'm like, what is he? And I see it all the time on the train, especially when people are on their cell phones. Yeah. It's hilarious. I'm like, wow, like this guy's peeping this girl's, totally. Her phone or whatever. Anyways, so so one of the things about the things that I had to overcome was knitting in public, because knitting is associated with women and grandmas, and only women do that. So I've never seen men knit, right? And so that was like, well, I don't want people pointing at me and staring at me, so I'm not going to do that. And I would always carry my projects in my duffel bag on my way to work every day. And I realized I was wasting so much time. So
it's great knitting time.
Right. Yeah. So my lunch hour at work, that's where I would do my knitting, and then that was it. And then until I got home. But my commute to and from work is like an hour and 15 minutes to and from, right? So I'm wasting all this time, and I'm like, and it was just frustrating me, because I'm like, I really want to knit, but I was so more concerned about what other people were thinking about me and how they were going to perceive me should I knit in public. Anyways, I eventually overcame that. And fast forward a few years later, which was 2 years ago, I'm on my way home from the gym, and I'm just doing. The minute I get on the train now, I don't even think twice about it. I just knit. I pull out my bag. I'm like, all right, let me
Wait,
find it.
and before I want to hear the story, but like, did people give you shit like what you were worried about?
No. So interesting enough, the day that I decided, all right, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna knit in public, and I'm gonna do this on the train. Nobody was like staring at me. People were looking at me, but more of an intrigue, like to see a guy knitting. And eventually people started coming up to me saying, wow, it's so cool to see a guy knit. And I'm like, huh, interesting.
Men and women?
Wow, men and women and kids. Like, it's crazy. Like, and it would just spark conversations. And and I've met some friends through these conversations on trains, and we became friends throughout the years.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I realized that, the entire time I was judging myself. It wasn't people judging me. It was me judging myself and me putting myself in that box. And when I realized that, it was like this sense of freedom. I was like, wow, I don't care what anybody has to say anymore. I'm going to do what I want. And from that point on, I wouldn't even think twice about just knitting on the train or in public, or if I'm sitting at a park or whatever, and I'll pull out my knitting and I don't even think about it.
Do you remember though what it was like that first time? Like, when you were walking in the subway, were you like psyching yourself up, or you're like, today's the day that I do it?
No, dude. I broke a sweat and everything. I'm sitting in the train and I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Just do it. And don't even look around. Just go in, get your project, pull it out, and just don't even look up. And that's what I did for the first 10 minutes. But the thing about knitting is that it's very therapeutic, right?
How so? Because I don't knit.
The rhythm of you creating these stitches, like once you learn how to knit, it really is there. I could have the worst day ever. And the minute I pick up my project, all my problems are gone.
So it's kind of like meditation?
It really is. Because you're focusing so much on what you're doing that you just forget about everything else.
So basically,
and people around you.
It was curing your anxiety as you were having
the
actual anxiety.
So the whole time, right? So interesting enough, right? I knew this at the time that knitting is therapeutic, but my anxiety level was at 100, and I'm just like, oh my God, I know people are looking at me, but then I forgot that I'm knitting in public for the first time, and next thing you know, I'm like, oh wait. I'm knitting, and I look up, and that's when I realized, I was like, wow, I wasted all this time not knitting on the train because of my fears, when in fact they never existed.
Yeah.
That problem never existed. It was interesting.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm just like, the two of us for some reason have been like really excited about this conversation. I feel like we've had all kinds of people on and we've been like, I can't wait for this one.
Well, it's funny because like I feel like the parallel for me was even doing this show. Like, I was scared to do a show that was going to be about men talking about stuff that some people might think is soft or whatever.
Right.
And it took, like, I mean, we literally like practiced doing this for like almost 6 months before we even launched the show. Avi might have jumped in quicker, but I was like scared, and it's true that not only does nobody like care, nobody has a critical negative thing to say, at least to our face, but like most people are appreciative. They're like, oh, that's so cool that you're doing that, but it's always like your fears of like, what would happen, like, would the whole earth shake if like a man did something like knit on a subway? Like you build up this like huge.
You're right, and it's so funny you bring that up, because we put up these blocks in our lives where it's like, well, if I do this, then this might happen, and this is going to be the consequence to that, you know. But 9 times out of 10, we put those blocks and those fears in our lives, and don't realize that we're doing that, because it's just the way we're either brought up or our surroundings, depending on where you live. But
let's be real. There are.
It's not coming from nowhere.
There are toxic males out there who will mess with somebody. Oh, yeah. And I imagine, like,
it's happened to me. Absolutely.
So what happened?
Yeah.
Give an example.
So a few years after I started learning how to knit, I love this story because it was my one and only encounter, and it was what turned from negative to a real positive. So I'm sitting on the train, I'm knitting, and a few seats down from me is an African-American male, older gentleman, must have been in his 50s. And then,
by the way, just for our listeners, can you just describe what you look like? And
so I'm a short Hispanic, 5'5", dude. I'm like I weigh like $125.
Okay.
So, like,
Okay.
so I'm a short dude. I'm 44 years old. So yeah, so so imagine I'm just here I'm sitting on the train, minding my own business. I'm knitting, and I'm to my left. I see the gentleman sitting next to me. He looks at me a couple times as I'm knitting, and then at the next stop, in walk two younger African American males, and they're sitting across from me, off to the side, like diagonal from me from across. Yeah. Now, typically when I'm knitting, I'm just so into my project that it takes a lot for me to look up. And at this particular point, I hear them laughing. Mm-hmm. And when I look up, because I wanted to see what was so funny, right? Because I'm like, and I look up, they're looking directly at me. So I'm like, oh, they're laughing at me. Ugh. Right. So yeah, here comes the anxiety part, right? Yeah. So here comes that fear that I talked about a few years before. And now it's coming to, it's coming.
Realization.
Right, exactly. So all of a sudden, the older gentleman who's sitting to the side of me, he looks at the boys, looks at me, looks back at them. He's like, what's so funny? Oh, because you see a guy knitting, you think it's funny? And they're just still, at this point, they're still laughing, up, right? Yeah. They're cracking up. Now, they must be like 17, 18 years old, right? I'm assuming that's how old they were. And he looks at me. He goes, let me ask you a question. He's like, how long you been doing that? I was like, I've been doing this for a couple of years. He's like, do you make money off of that? And I was like, yeah, actually, I do. I have a small business, and I make custom pieces. So then he turns back to the guys. He's like, now, when you can do what he does and make money off of it, then you could laugh. And even then, you can't laugh because you can't do what he's doing. And these two boys got up and left. So it was like, and I just got up and I shook his hand and said, thank you, man. You didn't have to do that. He's like, no. He's like, I'm tired of this. People are so judgmental these days. And he's like, they see somebody doing something and right away they assume, everything under the sun. And I'm like, you're right. And I said, but I appreciate that. And I love telling that story because it was my only encounter, right?
Yeah.
We live in a society now where, nothing surprises anybody anymore, right? Yeah. So, it was just that one moment in my life where I just said, all right, back to reality. You know what I mean? And for that split of that moment in my life, I felt that fear again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it was like he brought it back. And it was just like, it was interesting. It was interesting because at that moment, that's when I said, listen, you're going to have your naysayers, right? You're going to have people that are not going to approve of whatever it is that you're doing out there. And I realized that at that moment in my life, I realized, like, you got to be okay with that.
That's a good point. It's a good point. It's like, I think I often wish, like, there won't be any haters out there, but it's more about just being okay with it.
Yeah, and that's it. You're not going to change people's minds. You're not going to, there are going to be people you're not going to be able to change their lives, right? But you're not here for them.
Mm-hmm. Where did you grow up?
I grew up here in New York. I grew up in Brooklyn most of my life and moved to Pennsylvania for a couple of years, finished high school out there, and then came right back.
Which part of Brooklyn?
So I grew up in East New York, which is the east side of New York, Brownsville area, and then I've been all over Brooklyn ever since.
I've been living in Brooklyn for a long time, and I have some friends who used to teach in East New York, but for listeners who are non-New Yorkers, East New York is about as quote unquote rough, tough of a neighborhood as it gets in New York.
Right.
It is a really tough neighborhood, and so I'm just thinking in my head, it's one thing if you were, let's say, like, a guy growing up in Westchester in some kind of privileged environment, and you feel like the world is your oyster. Right. You can do whatever you want and knit on a subway. It's a whole other thing to be a guy from East New York to be doing.
So let me just paint the picture. So when I was growing up, right. We weren't even allowed to play outside.
Oh.
So that was our activities were always done at home. So our mom, she was an illustrator, and so we always had arts around us. And so she'd come home with coloring books or games, and that's what kept us occupied, but the fear of us, going outside and God forbid something happening, because it was a rough neighborhood back then. We're talking about like mid 80s, early, going into the 90s, it was rough. And so, luckily enough, she decided to pick up, that's it, we're done. And we're moving out of here, and we're getting a house, and we're moving to the state, into Pennsylvania. So we're like, all right, great. But, I embraced all of my past, right? And it's molded me to become the person that I am today. And I don't regret anything, you know. And I tell my mom that all the time. I'm like, you know, I'm glad I had that experience of growing up and sometimes not being able to go outside and play unless it was with my mom, right?
Do you think in a weird way, just the fact that you grew up in a place like East New York gave you the kind of confidence to be like, you know, I came from this place.
Right.
Nobody can tell me that I'm a man that I'm not a man if I
Right.
want to knit on the subway. Do you think in a weird way it like helped you?
It did. You had to
Yeah.
have a tough skin.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You really do have to have a tough skin to have lived back then in East New York and see the things that we saw, and you know, it wasn't the most pleasant things that we experienced and saw, but it did help us, you know what I mean, and it created that tough skin, you know, me and my siblings had, you know.
But also like on the flip side of things, not many men in the world are openly knitting,
No.
but definitely not many East New York men are. So I imagine, you know, especially growing up in that kind of environment, I mean, the presence of your mom kind of promoting the arts and exposing you to creative pursuits and the pleasure of that must have been a really powerful influence, you know, for you to just have the confidence to be like, I'm gonna, you know, because I had a dream of knitting, I'm gonna go for this, and like,
Yeah.
because I just feel like so many men, me and Avi included, just don't have the confidence to do something like knit, especially publicly, because we were just conditioned by other guys we grew up with, you know, to stick to quote unquote masculine activities.
Right,
You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Yeah.
And here's the thing: there are stigmas attached to these things, right? And once you realize that, you know, stigmas exist for reasons because they were created by society, right? And once you can get over those stigmas, you really do open. There's a whole different world that opens up to you.
Yeah.
And I realized that, you know, and it's benefited me, you know, because of that. You know, I decided to step out, you know, by chance and say, you know what, why not? Even having those fears and those frustrations and those stigmas that came along with it, I was like, screw it, I'm gonna do it. And when I did, I realized, wow, like my life completely changed.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, like when I'm thinking about your story, and we didn't even finish the story, we gotta get back to it. But it occurs to me like whatever your like receptiveness to that dream, it's like I'm assuming you must have done, anyone who's gonna like have a dream like that and listen to it and be like, I kind of liked how I felt in the dream. I should go try that
Right.
out. Like has already probably done a lot of work in some way to be open to like, oh, this is a new thing and it was cool. And I'm just sort of curious. Do you think that's true for you? Like,
I think it's different for everybody,
Mhm.
honestly. I was at a point in my life where I was looking for something, right? For years, I was trying to figure out, well, what am I good at? You know, and I never, I was, you know, I dibbled and dabbled here and there, and I was like, all right, well, that's not my thing really. I'm not really passionate about it. But when I discovered knitting, interestingly enough, I fell in love with it. I was like, this is crazy. Like, I have a dream. I try it out, and I love it. Like, what are the chances and the odds of that happening, right? So that from that moment, I said, okay, I'm gonna really embrace myself. I'm gonna really dive into this. I'm gonna go down that rabbit hole, and I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna see what I can do, what I can create. And when I saw that I found what others found difficult was easy for me, I realized it's like, yeah, this is your thing, buddy. And I had to talk to myself. I had to have that conversation with myself where I was saying, I'm separating myself, and there's something unique here, and I really gotta dive into this. And when I did, that's when I realized that, yeah, this is it for me. And it just like snowballed after that, like, and it just had so many different layers to it, and I never looked back. And one of the promises that I always made myself was that, Louis, if this ever feels like work, then it's not for you. This is not passion. Like, you should always enjoy this. You should always be passionate about this. But if it ever felt like, oh, I gotta knit, you know what I mean? Like, it's never. I've been doing this now for 11 years, and not a day has gone by that I'm like, yeah, let's do this. You know what I mean? And I get excited about it.
Yeah.
You know, so every moment I pull out the project, I'm like, all right, let's do a couple more rows.
It's honestly, it's an inspiring thing to hear you talk about it, because I mean, something Avi and I talk about on this podcast sometimes is, you know, beyond knitting, just men have a difficulty even figuring out what they like, even if it's a more conventional thing.
Right.
Like, how do you know you actually like something?
Right. Like so often I think, you know, I mean, just speaking for myself, so many of the things that I am drawn to, if I really question myself, I'm like, oh, am I only drawn to that because, you know, society told me that that would be a cool thing to get into, or is it something I'm authentically into? And I think the way that our, like, you know, gender roles are set up is like there's so many things that definitely as a boy I felt cut off from. Like, I would have never considered like doing ballet or whatever. Who knows if it would have been something that could have been the passion of my life that I fell in love with. You know what I mean? But I completely cut off that possibility. So it's so cool to hear, just to hear like what it's like to find that thing. You said that it changed your life in other ways. I mean, once you had that breakthrough moment of starting to do it on the subway and realizing, you know, that you truly didn't care about what other people thought about you while you were knitting on the subway. How did it change the way that you interact with your work, with your relationships outside of work, with your family? How did it change your other?
Yeah, interesting enough, I became more creative in all aspects of my life.
Oh.
So I started, you know, when I first started knitting, it was always I was following other people's patterns, and I was just like, you know what? Why don't I make my own patterns? And I started doing that. And the moment I started, all right, I started off really. I made my first simple hat, let's just say, and I designed it, and I was really proud of that. I wrote out the pattern, I put it up on Etsy, and it sold. Like, you know, as a download, I'm like, wow, this is cool. I can make money off of this. And that's when the website came out, and that's when I realized, okay, I have a niche here, you know. And I'm like, all right, I have something a little bit different, and I think outside the box when I knit. So when I design, I'm not designing your typical sweaters, traditional sweaters or hats. No, I'm talking about I use elements like textiles like leather and suede, and like I'll incorporate all that into my pieces, and it's opened up these windows in my brain. That's the best way to explain, where it's like, hey, try this, and it'll be like I'm getting ready for bed. It's 11 o'clock at night, and all of a sudden I get this thought. I'm like, oh, that would be cool. That would be a really cool scarf, or really cool. And I get up and I just start sketching, and that, you know, and it's just one of those things that, like, you know, and even at home, it's like I was never into like interior designing or anything like that. And all of a sudden it's like, all right, when did this happen? And I'm like pulling out like samples, and I'm like, all right, we're going to change up the curtains, or we're going to pull out a new area rug. And I start laughing at myself. I'm like, yeah, this has to be part of the knitting, where I'm like getting creative, and I start seeing things around me, and I stop looking at things as just as what they are. Mm-hmm. And that's the beautiful part about it, is that I could take something that looks ugly and just be like, no, we're going to make it. So I started resurfacing furniture, and I started like reupholstering, you know, seats, and like, I'm like, that was never me. I was never that guy. But when I started opening those doors to being creative, so much more came out, and I was like, this is cool.
That's awesome. So you're making like everything a canvas, like
and it's just like, I mean, I don't do it all the time, but like, you know, I'm open to those ideas now. As to in the past, I'm like, oh, I can't do that. I don't have enough talent to do that, right? But it was about taking that very first step and saying, I'm going to teach myself how to knit.
It's also cool. I'm thinking about, we interviewed this guy a few weeks ago, David Epstein, who wrote this book called Range, about the benefits of having like lots of different experiences, and how that instead of like really focusing on one thing in your life, it's like the people
when you're a little kid, like starting from when you're a little
like
kid,
specializing that like when you have lots of different experiences, you can sort of take from different disciplines and you can add something new to something. And I'm hearing that in
it's interesting that you bring this up. So one of the things that I do now is that I travel all throughout New York and the tri-state area, and I go into schools, public schools, and I talk to kids about my story. And I also talk about anti-bullying, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. But one of the things that I always tell the kids is that, and especially at that age, right? If you feel like there's something out there that you want to learn how to do, dance, learn how to paint, whatever it is, make slime. I always tell the kids because they connect with slime. I don't know why they're into making slime these days, but
My son
they
loves
love
slime.
it. They love it, right? So, I always throw first question I always throw up at an assembly at an elementary school is, how many people like to make slime here? And all the hands go up, and you hear them all going crazy, right?
Who knew?
So you got to find that connection, and so that's their connection, slime, and so I tell them, what if you can take your love of making slime and make money, and you hear them chattering. So it's like, so that's where I start, right? Mm-hmm. So then I go into like them exploring the ideas of trying things out for the first time, whether you're good at it or it fails. Keep going on to the next thing until you find that one thing that you really like and stick with it. And when you find it, dive right into that. So I break it down to the kids with that when it comes to that. And I kind of sort of do the same thing with adults. And when I have these conversations at like conventions and, I'm doing a lecture somewhere, I always challenge people to do that, just to really like figure out what it is that you're good at.
So let's get, back to the narrative.
Yeah.
How did you get to the point where you were invited to do a TED Talk? So you were knitting on the subway. Did someone notice you and film you at some point? Okay.
So what happened 2 years ago? I got noticed. I spotted on the train. I'm coming in. I knit, and sitting right before me was former American Idol contestant Frenchie Davis, who's now on Broadway. She's got a record coming out. She was sitting in front of me. Now, I had no idea she was sitting in front of me, and I know who she is. But I was so into my knitting at the time that I never look up. She ended up taking a photo of me, and that night posted onto social media this photo of me knitting. And the caption read, "This brother on the train is my hero today." And I didn't know any of this. I wasn't following her at the time or anything like that. And then the next morning I'm at work, and I get a text message from an old friend of mine. He's like, "Dude, you're all over social media." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "There's this photo of you knitting on the train." I'm like, "Shut up." And he's like, so he sends me a screenshot of Frenchie's post. And I'm like, "What the hell? That was last night. Who's taking?" And so the first reaction is like, "This is creepy. That was last night. I knew what I was wearing last night, right?" So I'm like, "Who's taking my picture?" And when I realized who it was, I was like, "Wait, that's Frenchie Davis." And I'm like, "Wow." I'm like, "This is insane." So like right away I go on, I start communicating with her. Long story short, the photo started circulating all over, and it caught the attention of the Daily News here in New York. And they reached out to me through social media, and they were like, "Hey, you keep popping up on our feeds. We want to know about your story with Frenchie Davis. Can we interview you?" So they came over, we took some photos, and we did like a 2-hour interview. And the woman that interviewed me, her name is Christina Correga, and she told me that right before she left my apartment that night, she says, "Get ready." And I'll never forget what she told me. She said, "Get ready, because a story like this is going to hit big." And I was like, "No, it's not. It's just a guy knitting on the train." I was like, she's like, "No, the things that you said about your fears and about you breaking down these gender walls and you just not caring about that's going to resonate with a lot of people, Louis." And I was like, "Okay, whatever you say." I'm thinking, yeah. So she told me, she's like, "How's your website right now?" And I was like, "It's okay." She's like, "You need to upgrade that, like, tonight." I was like, "What do you mean?" So it's like, she's like, "I saw your website and it's nice, but people are going to be flocking to your website." And I thought about that at that very moment. I was like, okay. So as soon as she left, I call my web girl. I'm like, "All right, we got to work on my website just in case." And I tell you, so like a few days later, the article dropped, and it was insane.
Really?
It was insane. I started getting calls from New York 1, Brooklyn News 12. I was getting a call from Detroit News, newspaper out in Detroit. I mean, it was just a flood of, and then here come the sales. I literally doubled sales overnight in what I make in 1 year. So I was like, I was losing it. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't expecting this to happen. So like at that moment in my life, I'm like, what is happening? And I had to like take a couple days off from work to figure this out.
Yeah.
And it was just a flurry of messages and emails from various sources and media wanting to interview me. And I took it one by one, and I was like, all right, we're going to do this. And that's how it started. And then, so this happened 2 years, right? So
is that like I've never experienced something like that, but like, when I've published something, I will get like a flurry of emails, and it's both good and also not so good.
Oh, I got the negative feedback too.
But I also just mean like it's a lot to come at you. Like even if it's good, it's like I'd like to reply to everyone. I'm a therapist. People ask me for help, so I'm like I gotta connect everyone to help. Like it's a lot. It's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot, and it's it's a whole job in itself.
Yeah.
Like me managing now my social media is like, and I'm the type of person that I like to be engaging with others, and even if it's a heart, a like, or whatever, like as long as I'm responding to people, I feel like I owe them that much. You know, you're taking the time out to comment on one of my posts, and unfortunately there's a lot of people out there that don't, and I get it. If you have thousands and thousands and thousands of followers, it's almost impossible to, but a lot of people, when things like this happen, they go viral, you know, they take it all in for themselves and they're not giving that back, right? So when this happened to me, I decided to make the right decision, which was you're not going to do that. You're not going to be that person that's going to take this in and just that's it and not give it back out to the community. You're going to do something with that. And that's when I started working with the schools, and I started working on this national anti-bully campaign. I started working with cancer patients, teaching them how to knit. I started creating a platform at the time that I didn't even know I was creating, and putting out that message to everybody. And it was one simple message that kept repeating itself over and over again, which was, don't be afraid to go out there and explore the idea of something that you like, right? It doesn't matter what people say at the end of the day. It's what matters most is what you say and what you put into your life. And it's benefited me, and you know, I've had so many wonderful opportunities because of this and because of my experience. And one of the things that I always make sure that I do is that for every good thing that happens to me, I give back somehow. And whether it's having people come onto my platform and sharing my platform with others, I create a space where if I have an event where I'm teaching an entire school how to knit, I'm going to need volunteers. So I open that up on my social media. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for volunteer knitters who wants to help. I always get more than I need.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's great because people out there just want to help and they want to give back somehow, but just sometimes they don't know how to do that. So I've been creating this platform where I can do that for others and also connect these people together and these communities together. And that to me is where I am right now. So 6 months ago, I'm going through emails and I see an email from TEDx. I'm like, no, this can't happen. This is no way. Now, I love TEDx speeches. I watch them all the time. So I'm going through this email. I'm reading it, and I'm like, they want to put me on the TEDx stage. This is insane. So I'm like, yeah, this has got to be bogus. So I write back. I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is awesome. You're nominating me. What's the next step? And they're like, you don't even have to fill out the application. All you need to do is now we need you to get the nominations from the outside source, meaning my followers. So I put it out to social media, and I'm like, hey guys, I just got nominated by the TEDx committee. They want me on. They want me to do a TED speech. This is crazy. Now I need your vote. So I put up a link, and literally it wasn't even a week. They call me from TEDx, and they're like, dude, you're on. I'm like, what do you mean I'm on? They're like, yeah, you had the most nominations.
Wow.
And
that must feel so
Yeah,
good.
it did. It was a moment that I was like, wow, like, you know, I see the messages on social media and I see the likes and I have a lot of followers, but to see what was happening with these votes and these nominations, and he even said it, he's like, they didn't even have to comment. All they had to hit was a simple yes or no, and there was a comment section on the application for the nomination, and he says almost everybody had like paragraphs talking about why they felt like. He's like, they didn't even need to do that. All they had to do was yes, no, and name and email address. That was it. And I just said, wow, it's amazing. And to be able to have that experience and to put together a speech about my story and give it back to the audience was probably the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life. But it was the most rewarding experience I ever had.
Oh,
yeah.
That's awesome. But that's like... seems like the ultimate affirmation of everything.
Yeah, and it's honestly like, I mean, I'll tell you right now, like, if all this was taken away from me today, I would be completely satisfied with my life.
Because you'd still have your knitting.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I'll have my knitting. But I mean, everything that's happened, it's a blessing to me. And any chance that I can get to share that with others, is important for me, because one of the biggest things that I realized was that this truly is attainable. You don't have to go viral to do the things that you really need to do in life. And that's important and I talk about that in my TED speech, that this can happen to anybody. Not necessarily someone taking a photo and putting it on social media, but more that once you find what you're really good at, anything is possible.
I mean, what I like about this is that you didn't have a plan to get famous or to get rich or anything.
No.
You were just following, this hobby that was more than a hobby. It was a love, basically. And, the world rewarded you. It's nice. So the advice question we have actually ties very much into probably the stuff that you've talked about in your TED
Talk.
Talk.
We'll probably keep talking about it in a way, but yeah. Okay. Hey, man, my son sucks at basketball. He loves basketball and works hard at it, but he's always the worst player on his team. And when he has a bad game, as he often does, he's devastated afterwards. He generally struggles with self-esteem, and I feel like this exacerbates things. I wish he'd quit basketball and do something that aligns more with his strengths and makes him feel better about himself. But he loves basketball and says he doesn't want to play other sports. Kyrie is his hero. What should I do? Keep encouraging him, even though it's pretty clear he's not ever really going to be good? Keep subtly pushing him towards something else? Please help. Signed, Sad Dad in Diker Heights.
Sad Dad in Diker Heights.
Yeah. Don't be sad.
So here's the thing. He's got that passion and he's got that drive, which is why he's still doing this. And even if he sucks, he's not always going to suck. And that's the thing. And we, as an adult, we see this. And I think, I don't have kids myself, but, I do have younger nephews. And my nephews have been playing sports all their lives. And in the very beginning, they sucked. Yeah. They all sucked. But they loved it so much that they kept with it. And as long as the person has that drive and has that passion, continue encouraging them, pushing them forward, because that's important. If this kid wants to play basketball, regardless of how bad he sucks and how frustrated he becomes, you got to let him rock out. You got to let him rock out, and you got to let him be. And that's one of the things that as a parent, you want to be there to hold the child, and just like when they fall down and they hurt themselves, you want to be able to pick. There are times that you just got to let them go, and it's hard. Yeah. It's hard, but I feel like sometimes, like, especially with kids, they get frustrated easily. And I see this all the time, you know? And one of the things that I do, like when I go into a school and one of the things that I look around in the audience, like if we're teaching 200 kids how to knit, and one of the things that I look at is, where are the kids that are crying? And I always look for those kids. And there's always 3 or 4 of them. Out of a sea of 200 kids, you see 3 or 4 kids crying in the corner somewhere because they can't get it. They can't figure it out. Those are the ones that I target. Those are the ones that I go to. I'm like, what's up, buddy? Talk to me. I can't get this. It's too hard, and I don't know. Everybody's doing it, and I can't do it, and I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm like, all right, come on. So I pull that kid to the side. And sometimes all you need with that kid is 5 minutes. That's my goal. 5 minutes with the kid. All right, sit down. I'm like, wipe your tears. We're going to do this together. And literally, like, it just takes patience. And I'm like, look at me. You see what I'm doing? Try it. And encouraging them each and every time that they do the right thing. I'm like, oh, this is good. You got it. And all of a sudden, that frown starts to turn into a smile. And he starts wiping off the tears. Within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, the kid's knitting. Yeah. And it's just like, and I do that. And I walk around and I look for that. But for this kid that loves basketball so much, and he's not good right now, just let him go. Just let him do what he wants, right? And
don't get in his way.
Don't get in his way. Yeah. If you're saying to yourself, okay, I don't want people to laugh at him or anything. We think of those things, but I don't think he's really looking at that. Because if he's still there, it's for a reason. There's a reason. We got to find out what that reason is. Why is he really sticking with basketball? What is it about basketball you love so much that you can't tell the kids, oh, well, you suck, right? So, but You want to find out what that kid, why he's still there.
What if it's, I mean, we can't know because this guy's not in the room with us, but or his son's not in the room with us, but what if it is that, like, how does he know that he's not just playing basketball because that's the cool thing at his school that boys are expected to do, when inside maybe he would actually really connect to something like knitting? I think that's, again, one of these tricky things. I think sometimes it's hard for men to figure out, like, am I doing this because it's cool? Do I love am I passionate about this thing because it's cool or because I actually love it? And I suppose if he's sticking with it even when he's really bad,
that says he cares.
Yeah, and his dad is not forcing him to do it. Obviously, his dad would prefer if he did something else. But but I don't know. I mean, another thing that I'm curious about, Louis, is like your message when you talk to kids in schools is about finding something. Well, how would you frame it? Is it about finding something that you love or finding something that you're really good at?
No, we want to start with something they're good at.
Okay, but he's not good at basketball.
Right. So here's the thing. So in this case, as you were talking about this, I thought about something, and there's always signs, right, as to why we all do what we do. And going back to this kid, he's got to be given some type of sign as to why he's sticking to basketball. Is it because all his friends are playing basketball? Is it because he likes a girl at school and he wants to impress the girl? What is it that's really driving him there? The kid probably does know that he's not great at it. Okay?
Like, how can you ignore
How can you? Right.
Yeah.
But he's so determined to stick with this.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Right? He says he loves it. You got to take his word for it. Now, if that's the case, then and you realize as a parent that, all right, he's in this not for the right reason, you don't take them out of basketball. What you do is you introduce them to other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Start and just, hey, you know what we're gonna do today? We're gonna go take a hip hop class, hip hop dance class, or we're gonna go take a painting class, and just watch and observe the kid. If he lights up, that's his thing. Right? It's about taking that kid and letting them try out all these different things until, as a parent, you see that kid light up. When your son or daughter lights up, you're like, oh, they really like this and they're really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I agree with what you're saying, because I remember when I was like, I don't know, it must have been 11 or 12, and I really wanted to take guitar lessons, and I took violin lessons before that, and I'd never practiced the violin and guitar. I wasn't getting it. I was really frustrated. And then I have this memory was always really important to me of like I basically spent like an entire day in my room just like practicing, like the 5 songs that I had learned at that point until I got them like really, really good. And I was so proud of myself. And like nobody spends a whole day doing something unless they like really care, even if they suck. You know what I mean? Like there's something about like when you're into it, it feels good to work hard, and that's a good sign, I think.
Absolutely. I think we all try to get to that point where like once we've achieved that goal, like I did it. Like I remember when I made my first scarf, and it was horrible, right? It wasn't perfect, but I was so proud of that piece, and I was like, I made my first scarf. And I look back at it now and I start laughing compared to what I'm doing now. It's just like, oh, Louis, you had no idea what the hell you were doing back then, but it's okay. But I was so proud at that moment, and that just propelled me to the next level to want more. And I think that goes for anybody. Let it be sports, let it be fashion, let it be, painting, whatever it is that you decide to tap into, and you start achieving these mini goals, you start setting yourself for these higher goals.
I'm thinking about my experience as a kid, because I was obsessed with basketball as a kid. I grew up in Boston. The Celtics are obviously a legendary NBA team.
Course.
And I wanted to be like Larry Bird and Reggie Lewis and all these guys. And I had a basketball hoop in my backyard. And I did suck for a long time. But I would practice every single day by myself, shooting free throws, dribbling, playing one-on-one with my friends every single day. And eventually I went from being one of the worst players on my, various teams to eventually being decent, to eventually making like the JV team in my high school. And by the time I made the JV team, it was like this dream that I had accomplished. But anyway, long story short, I sucked on the JV team. I did make the JV team.
You peaked. That
but
was
but like sometimes like, you know, hindsight is 20/20 obviously. But when I look back, I'm like, because I ended up becoming a writer, right? That is actually what I'm really good at. I always knew that I had skills at writing because I always could just, like, it was just the one academic subject I just got really easily. I always had a way with words. I listened to hip hop a lot as a kid, and I loved the language and would memorize the songs. And just, I loved language. I always did. But I never thought of like writing as something that I could really do. And you know, I, till a comically late age, still dreamed about playing in the NBA. And I think, but just looking back on it, like sometimes I'm like, oh, you know, like maybe I could have like wasted way less time if my parents had just pushed me away from basketball, and like gotten me to like focus on my writing earlier or whatever. And now that I think about it though, like I'm glad that I was allowed by my parents to suck for a long time at basketball.
Right.
Get better at it. And finally realize that like I did get better at it. I loved doing it, but it wasn't what I was good at. And eventually, like obviously, I actually decided not even to try out for the varsity team. I was like, all right, I think I see how good I can get at this, and that's when I started kind of getting more into writing. But I think had I not, I don't know. I think you need to like test out stuff for a long time. You know, before you see like whether you're good at it or not. Because it's true. Like, I mean, like you said, even you sucked at knitting at first, you know, like.
Yeah, I did. You know, it's like I picked it up, but doesn't necessarily mean that my stitches were great. But, you know, going back to what you were saying, the idea of exploring all these different things, especially at an early age, is so important because it's going to build character to that child. And I remember that, you know, growing up, I had that experience. You know, like I tried acting at one point and I loved it and I stuck with it for a while, and then I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I tried playing sports. I sucked at it too. You know, it wasn't my thing. And so I was like, well, what's my thing? So for years, I was going through all these different changes in my life and trying to figure out what I was good at. And it didn't happen until I was in my early 30s. You know, sometimes it takes us that long to figure out what it is that we're good at. But as long as a parent, if you're doing your job and just opening up these ideas to the child and saying, look, you could do anything you want. Don't limit yourself. And that's the thing, because, you know, we're confining ourselves in these boxes all the time and saying, well, you're supposed to do this. You know, boys do this, girls do that. Now we see women that are electricians and carpenters and, you know, playing football and basketball. You know, like the idea of, you know, crossing over onto something different is not necessarily a bad thing sometimes. You know, when you think about the fashion world, you know, all these fashion houses, it's mostly men.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing with hair design and makeup. You see a lot of men in these industries that are surpassing the women as well as the women. Women are becoming electricians. I've seen like women constructing homes and playing sports, and they're badass. Like, it's crazy, you know. And I remember growing up, my cousin, female, she used to play handball. So Brooklyn is known for handball. Yeah. I don't know if everybody out there knows this, but Brooklyn is like, the sport is handball in the summertime. You don't see it in the wintertime because it snows, so you can't play handball outside, right? But spring, summertime, everybody's at the handball courts. And growing up, my cousin, who was a female, long hair, long fingernails, would get onto a handball court and wipe all these guys out with long fingernails. And she was known for that. Never scraped her fingernails on the floor. It was just like, how do you do it? And she would kick their asses. It was insane. And I always looked up to her. I was like, wow, this is awesome that you're a girl. And she's like, girls can do anything. And I remember this, her telling me this, girls can do anything boys can. And that always stuck with me. And I use that, and I'm like, okay, and we can reverse that. You know what I mean? And it's like, who's to say that you can't do that because it's considered a girl's activity, or a girl going into a guy's craft, sport or something like that, or career. You know, we got to get out of that mindset. We got to get out of this idea of that you can only do this and you can only do that. And when you open up yourself to these ideas, anything can happen.
I think just like it's worth pausing and reflecting on the fact that even though, especially after Me Too went viral, you know, and all these, you know, years of abuse by men against women and all of this toxic masculinity has reached the headlines, it's easy to just think that like that gender relations are like at a really bad point. You know, and that things are getting worse. But actually, in these small ways, I think things are so much more advanced and better than when I was a kid.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
and you know, just like I think I wonder, like, if you were knitting on the subway, you know, 10 years earlier, I'm not sure like how, you know, it might have been a worse situation, you know,
Right.
but it's anyway, it's just worth, I just want to appreciate that, like, a lot of these boundaries are being broken too. And, you know,
Like both can be true at the
yeah,
same
I think there's like an advance of toxic masculinity on the one hand and an advance of non-toxic masculinity on the other hand.
Right. And we have to have these conversations nowadays. Like, you know, there's so much happening right now, and there's so much divide, not only in our country but in the world. And you know, having these conversations about opening up to the idea of something different, right? Offering something different, and just diving into something that normally we wouldn't as men, or vice versa. And that's important to understand, because I see so much of that, you know, happening nowadays, where it's like, you see with our kids, I see it all the time, you know, when I'm walking into these schools, and it's just like kids are being picked on because, you know, the kids dancing or something, or, you know, whatever it is that we're not typically seeing amongst boys versus girls. And so, you know, having these conversations and talking openly about it, and saying, okay, you know, what are we going to do about this? And that's, you know, we're never going to have the right answers. We're never going to, you know, eliminate the issues. They're always going to be there. But putting a dent into the issue is enough, you know?
Yeah, I'm curious. This is sort of off topic from the question, but like, you know, so I'm a psychotherapist, and I spend all day with people's feelings and emoting with people and trying to help people through hard times. And honestly, I don't think, particularly my dad quite got why this was something I wanted to do, and he couldn't really relate and didn't really have, I don't think, a high opinion of therapy. And I just had to sort of do what I wanted to do anyways. And I'm kind of curious, like, how's your family? Like, so now your name is sort of like the guy who knits, and like, is your family, like, how do they feel about that?
They're really proud of me.
Yeah.
For the most part, I should say that. I mean, I still have family members that now they're getting used to the idea, because I'm more out there, and they see me out there. Oh, I just saw you on the news, or I just saw you in an article, and I'm like, yeah. And, you know, my parents always embraced whatever I did, you know, and I love that about them, that they just let me rock out, as I call it. But I had to adapt, like, growing up, and coming from a Latino culture, I still had the men in my family that were not okay with certain things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you should be playing baseball. Why aren't you playing baseball? Or why didn't you join the Marines when all the men in our family have been Marines? I don't want to be a Marine.
Was your dad a Marine?
Yeah, my father was a Marine. My grandfather was a Marine. Both my uncles were Marines.
Damn.
So in high school, my senior year, guess who came knocking on my door at homeroom? It was the Marine Corps. I'm like, wow, they're showing up, because my grandfather sent them to my high school, looking for me, thinking that I was going to join the Marines. And I was like, nah, that's not my thing, sorry. And they were so disappointed in me. They were very disappointed. And I'm like, wow, they want me to become a Marine, but that's not what I want. I know I don't want to do that.
I have to say, I'm curious what it was like for you. Like, something about disappointing my parents is like the worst feeling.
It is
in
the
world.
worst feeling. It is because, we want to do good by them. We want them to be proud of us. We don't want them bowing their heads and shaking their heads at us. We want them, that's my son.
Mm-hmm.
That's my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
That's so important to have that, that recognition and saying, wow, they approve of what I'm doing. And even till this day, I'm 44 years old and I'm still looking for my parents' approval.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, and it's hard, but you have to separate your passions and your love for things in life and do it for yourself, not for anybody else, regardless of, even if it's your parents. You know what I mean? That's so important.
I think
By the way, I just want to say, I mean, it's just, it adds a whole other layer of kind of amazingness to your story that you come from a military family.
Oh, yeah.
I think, military guys in the way that we consider masculinity, that society thinks about masculinity, are like at the top of the totem pole. They're like the most masculine dudes in our society. And like we have these adjectives like hard and soft, and like dudes in the military are considered like the hardest guys in a way. And but I just keep thinking, like, to take out your knitting stuff and do it on the New York City subways is actually kind of hard. You know what I mean?
It is.
And I wonder, like, was there any like recognition, like, damn, like what he's doing is, I mean, it's not like he's going to Iraq and like, barging into a house with a gun, but like he's doing something that is risky and actually takes a lot of courage. And ironically enough, a lot of guys who are super brave and willing to go in the military probably would be terrified to do what he did.
Well, it's funny because, yes, and I respect my family. I respect the Marine Corps. I respect, the fact that they fought for our country and they're still fighting for our country. I bow down to that all the time. Did I want to be a part of that family? No. That's not who I am. Not, and it's not because I agree or disagree with, no, that's not what this is about. But that wasn't for me. That path, I knew that path wasn't going to be for me. I knew that I wasn't going to be happy there. So why should I join the Marine Corps? Because there's a legacy behind me, right? And yeah, part of me thought about it because I was like, wow, I'm the fourth Louis in my family. So like there's 3 other Louises behind me. And I said, no, this is where it stops. It ends with me. And that's where it ended. Funny thing is that, so the other day, well, not the other day, a few months back, I just, for the hell of it, said, I'm going to Google my name. And I Googled my name, and right next to one of my videos was a video of my grandfather.
Wow.
Talking about being a Marine. And I saw, wow, there's the difference. It's like, here's the Marine guy, and here's the knitter. It's like you have like one extreme to the other. And it's interesting. So if you guys want to go out there and just Google Louis Boria Jr. and his video comes up, and you'll see all my other videos come up, and it's right there. And I had to laugh because I said, wow, this is kind of extreme from one, going from Marine to knitter. And it's just like, to see that, it's like, I'm proud. I'm proud of my family for that, and I am.
By the way, I think weren't sailors really good knitters?
Oh yeah, let's take it back. Wait, so
it used to be masculine.
So let's touch on that for a little bit there. So knitting was started by men, and this is true. It's a true fact. Sailors used to knit their own sweaters.
I'm sure shepherds did.
Chainmail, like for armor. They used to do all that.
Yeah.
So it was started by men, and they had to. And then women took over the industry, and now it's just women, predominantly women. But men are slowly working their way back into the industry. But it was all men, and the same thing. Like apprentices were always men.
I think it's really funny. Sam and I talk about this sometimes. It's like when dudes in particular want to point back to like, as if there's some like precedent in history for like what a man is, like you're the hunter or whatever, and it's like they forget all the soft things that men used to do too.
Right,
you
right.
know what I mean? It's like we're very selective in what we think of as history. Also, by the way, I just want to circle back to this person. I feel like the story you're talking about, or that you and I were both talking about, like disappointing your parents and versus having to be yourself. It's like, if there's one piece of advice I would give to this dad, it's like, don't make your kid feel like he's a disappointment to you. Right. Honoring what he's excited about it. So be happy that he's excited. Like, don't make him feel like he's a failure in your eyes because you think he should be good. Because I think that's probably how it'll land. Is like if you're telling him don't play basketball, it's like you're embarrassed by him or for him.
Right.
I don't think that would, like, he'll pick up on that.
Or even having that conversation with the kid and saying, listen, I love that you love basketball, and if you want to do this, by all means, but just know that I'm proud of you no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's important to have that conversation, and so that kid knows that, all right, I'm on my own here. So if Dad's telling me it's okay, he's not going to look at me any different if I. It's
right.
It's
like you don't know if that's why he's doing basketball
exactly,
or not. Yeah.
And it's kind of telling the child, you know what? I'm telling you without letting you know that you can stay in this or stay out of it. It's totally up to you. You know what I mean? Without saying, oh, you suck. You don't want to let the kid know that. Never use the word suck, right? But I think having that conversation, an open conversation, say, you know what, I love you, and if this is what you really want to do, by all means, I'll support you.
Yeah.
And if you choose not to, I'm still going to support you, and I'm still going to be there for you.
I mean, one thing I'm thinking of is, that he could just offer to be outside with him and feed him the ball while he's practicing his drills,
exactly.
and just
Right.
spend
Show
more
him you
time with
believe in
him.
him,
Just be like, let's work on this together. Like, if you want to keep getting better, like, I'll help you out, and and I'm also just thinking, like, I mean, to this dad's credit, the boy is someone with low self-esteem who seems to be devastated and feel bad about himself every time after he has a bad game. I mean, who knows what the various other reasons are that he has low self-esteem. Some of them might have to do with his dad's relating to him in general. But I like your approach. If the father is just direct about his unconditional love for his son and makes it clear that that he supports him doing something that he really cares about. And then he'll be like an ally who's there showing up to, help him practice more or whatever. Then I think the kid's orientation to sucking. I shouldn't use the word. Struggling might change. Because I'm thinking back to, like, when I was in high school, middle school, whatever, and, they used to have captains and they would pick people, and, there would always be the same kids getting picked last or whatever. But you could there was a difference. Some of the kids who got picked last and who weren't very good, you could tell were miserable, and others just seemed to be having fun, even though they were not good. And I wonder, like, maybe this kid could turn into one of those kids who's having fun, even if he's not good. And like you said, everyone gets better if they practice a lot.
That's right.
So it seems like the first step is, like, the dad being supportive and helping him, embrace the fun of it. I think the kid has lost touch.
Of this episode is, like, enjoy it, right? Like, you got to find something you enjoy.
And this kid has lost, like you said earlier, you would never want knitting to be something that felt like a duty or work. And I think this kid has gotten caught up in feeling bad about not being a great player, and it seems like he's not really having fun anymore.
Well, and I guess that makes me think of one other thing he could do, which is, like, to just express in, like, a loving way, like, I see you, like, like, you seem so miserable. Like, are you really having fun doing this? Because there are other things you can do. And maybe there's a way that, or can we find a way for basketball to be fun again instead of you having to be Kyrie,
Right. Or, what's another good thing I would probably do is just write a list of different things that this kid can do and say, all right, you have to pick 3 things from this list, and we're going to explore these 3 things. And let the kid, you give him a list. You create the list, right? And you say, okay, well, let's try some arts. Let's try some hip-hop dance class. Let's try. You never know. And again, even for me, when I like I said, I never had a desire to want to knit. I didn't think I was going to be good at it until I had that dream and realized, oh, wow, I'm really good at this, and I actually like this. That kid could have that same experience. And maybe this parent can help that kid experience that by creating a list of just random things, and say, all right, well, karate, let's put karate lessons down. Let's put another sport, let's soccer, or a paint class, a hip-hop dance class. Like, just make it so out of the scope that it's like, all right, we got a bunch of things on the table. I need you to pick 3 things. But don't let it all be sports. Don't let it all be the arts. Give a good mix. And so you, from each category, you have to pick one thing.
By the way, another reason I'm glad we've had you on, Louis, is that we've had questions in the past about people who feel very unsatisfied in their careers. And I always think that, like, for a lot of people, the thing that you make money at is not necessarily the thing that is going to bring you a lot of joy and passion.
Yep.
But, like, it's... You can find something like knitting, and I'm imagining it's not your only job, or maybe it is now, but like for a long time you were knitting and it was your passion, but you still did something else. And I think that's just so important for people to realize that, like, the job that you get your paycheck for doesn't have to be the thing that brings you meaning and joy in life. Like, and it's really cool if you can find something like
true.
knitting.
So I still have a full-time job.
Yeah.
I work at Mount Sinai Hospital. I'm an executive assistant there, and I work a 9-to-5 job. That's my source of income. I like my job.
Yeah.
Is it my passion? No. I have my knitting on the side, and now it's creating this other whole new world for me, and it's this other new huge platform. And I'm still working both, right? But I do have an interesting story. So touching on what you just said, so the industry that I'm in, the knitting, I call it the fiber arts world.
Yeah, that's how my wife talks about it.
Fiber arts.
Yeah.
And just to break it down, fiber arts can be anything from knitting to crochet to weaving to making yarn to dyeing yarn. There's so much involved in the industry. But I met a wonderful woman by the name of Felicia Eve, who lives in Brooklyn. She owns a yarn shop.
What's the yarn shop?
It's called String Thing Studio. It's in Park Slope, Brooklyn.
Oh yeah, I know that place.
She is the only African-American yarn shop owner in New York anywhere. And
wait, they're still in business? Where are they at?
So she's
like
on 7th Avenue. She's on 7th Avenue, not too far from the Barclays Center.
Yeah.
So I met her 2 years ago when all this happened to me, and she told me an interesting story. I was like, wow, so you've always had knitting shops? And she's like, no, Louis. She was like, I used to be a podiatrist.
Dang.
Yeah, exactly. So now I'm like, wait, what? You were a podiatrist? She's like, yeah, I used to have my own practice. I was like, and so I couldn't make the connection. I was like, so, okay, you love knitting that much? She's like, yeah. She's like, I did. And I went to school to become a podiatrist, and I didn't love it. And I love knitting, and I gave up my practice to open up a knitting shop. And sometimes you have to do those things in life. So you go from being a podiatrist to opening up a yarn shop, and she's successful.
Yeah.
And she believed in this idea of opening up a space where everybody's welcomed. Men, women, people of color, doesn't matter if you're white, black. And she's created this space that's unique. I've been to so many other yarn shops everywhere throughout the country, and I've never felt as welcomed and at home as I have in her shop. You know, and that's important to have that. So she's created this space. People from around the world, when they come into New York, her shop is the first place they go to. It's crazy. If you're a knitter or a crocheter into the fiber arts, and you're coming from London or Spain or wherever it is you're coming from around the world, they make it a point to stop in her shop.
This is reminding me of when I was younger, I went on a family trip to Ireland, and there was this place that had this like incredible yarn. And my mom loves knitting. She was like, I'm going to make you, a sweater from this fine yarn. It's going to be like the most beautiful sweater. That was 20 years ago. She's still not done, so I'm going to have to get on her case about that. But anyway, we'd like to wrap up the show just asking if you have a piece of advice or wisdom. It could be a quote, something you read, something somebody told you that just meant a lot to you and that you've carried with you throughout your life. Is there anything that stands out in particular?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I've always noticed, and I'm speaking to artists out there, I'm speaking to professionals in their careers, our ultimate goal is to always make money, right? We all want to survive. We all want to make that money. But one thing that I noticed, even as an artist and seeing other artists out there, people in their careers, they want to get to that main goal, which is like, I want to be up that high ladder. And what they're forgetting is the journey that they're going through. And I realized that your journey is just as important as making that money. And having your focus solely on, I got to make that money, although it's important, don't let it be your main goal. because your journey is just as important. So be patient with yourself, right? Enjoy the journey that you're going through, because you're going to learn so much from your journey. And I'm still learning from my journey. And yeah, I want to make millions one day, right? That's the ultimate goal, but it's not the thing that I'm looking at right now. What I'm looking at is my current situation, my journey, and how I can get to the next level. And my advice to everybody is just that. Enjoy your journey, get to the next level when it's your time. Your time will come, and everybody's going to have that time.
And the journey doesn't end.
Even
if you make the $10 million
Yeah.
or whatever.
That's right. That's right. And once you make that $10 million and you hit that goal, now you have to achieve that. You have to make that next goal, and that's what it's about.
Gotta get
Start
that
right. So enjoy that process, man. It's so important, and don't be in a rush to be successful. Just enjoy every moment that happens, every step of the way. You know, it's so important to remember that. And we all get caught up in our big goals, and I've realized that, you know, we all forget where we're going, right? We want to get there, but it's about what's currently happening right now in our situation.
How can people find your stuff and your social media?
Yeah, so I have a website, which is brooklynboyknits.com. My social media, Facebook, Brooklyn Boy Knits, or Louis Boria, Louis Boria. I'm on Instagram as Brooklyn Boy Knits. I'm on Twitter as Brooklyn Boy Knits, but I'm going to spell it out for you because I ran out of characters on Twitter.
And we'll put all these links in the show notes.
So Twitter is BRKLYN Boy Knits.
Okay.
I'm on, what else am I on? Oh my gosh.
Etsy.
I do have an Etsy. I sell my patterns on Etsy, so it's not... But all items you can get onto my website. Okay. I sell all kinds of stuff, from yarn to custom pieces to pins and good stuff like that. But yeah.
Awesome. Great. Thanks
you
so much.
Guys, thank you for having me on, man. I appreciate it.